Good morning and welcome back to the Money Advantage podcast. Today we have a very fascinating conversation for you because we're going to be really digging into the matters of the heart and matters of the home, really some of the most important things that underlie our meaning and purpose and our sense of fulfillment in life. We have a great guest today that I'm really pleased to have on the show. This is Josh Straub. And so, Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel.
Awesome. And I'm really excited that Lucas gets to join us today as well as we're having a conversation about family and home. This is going to be
Yeah,
awesome.
get to replace Bruce as he's on vacation. So
I love it.
Awesome. Well, Josh, you and Christi wrote a book called Famous at Home. And I would love to just give a little bit of backstory on this because I read your book, listened to it on audiobook, and loved it. And we met you initially through
integrated. Yep.
Integrated, yeah.
About a little over a year ago, Colorado last year, and then seen you a couple times since. Yep. Through mastermind that we're involved with through family teams. And yeah, Josh has been a great guy as I've gotten to know him. And he brings a lot of experience and knowledge in the realm of relationships and family. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. So.
Awesome. So, Josh, you and Christi wrote this book called Famous at Home. And really, the purpose of our conversation today is to talk about those key relationships and the key part, the focus of the smallest unit of our lives that really is the most important. And I think comes up so frequently when somebody's doing that end of life reflection. They're looking back and saying, did I have fulfillment? Did I have purpose? Where was my identity? Did I matter to the people that were closest to me? I mean, where did this whole conversation start for you?
Yeah, so we started Famous at Home a number of years ago when my wife and I we started in the parenting space. We started with, helping understand like what really matters at the end of life as it comes to raising kids. Because early on in our childhood journey with our kids was pretty rough. It was like God humbled us in the very thing that he called us to, so we wouldn't pull our britches up too high, acting like we had it all together.
Yeah.
Our first two were super difficult. We colic acid reflux. Christy was on bed rest for 3 weeks with a back injury, just chronic back pain from a volleyball injury that she sustained in college. And and then in addition, my dad was going through congestive heart failure at the time and having surgeries. And our daughter was sleeping in 24 to 48-minute increments. Christy had some issues that she couldn't breastfeed. Like it was just like one thing topped on another. And so I went back into the research and I was like, what is the like, I know, and then there's all these parenting experts, right? And they're all giving you contradictory advice about what really makes a difference, how you raise your kids. And I just remember going back into the research because I'd done my doctorate in this area of research and relationships. And I wanted to see, I understand parenting's not easy, but what if it could be simpler than everybody made it out to be? Is there like when I'm 80 years old and I'm sitting on my rocking chair and I'm looking back at my grandkids, what will have been the single greatest factor in raising my kids? And every single research study I went back to for every major outcome I desired in my kids linked back to this phrase of emotional safety in the home. And I can talk a little bit about what emotional safety is, but that's the hub of the wheel, if you will. So there's all kinds of spokes. There's all kinds of, people come to us and say, hey, what about discipline? And, I'm having trouble disciplining this child and this 3-year-old or, screen time issues, anxiety, and in the marriage, like, hey, our marriage is struggling. So all of those are spokes. And we always go back to the hub of the wheel, which is emotional safety. And so that's kind of the core of what we do. And then but the other component of that is as we were in this, I was coaching and working with elite military ops, special operations guys and their spouses. I was working with professional athletes, musicians. I was working a lot with people similar to me because I would travel and speak. I was working with a lot of people who were out on the road. They were called away from home in order to earn a living, in order to have their calling and fulfill their calling. But it was, as a man who's deployed in the military, he's physically away from his family. As someone who's traveling and, as a professional athlete, or, if you're in athletics, you're in music, you're an entrepreneur, you're at conferences, it doesn't matter. When you're gone, what happens is we work so hard all the way from the very beginning of life, when the very first question that we're asked is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then identity becomes confused with what we're doing, and that carries on even to when we have a family, so much so that what we do is we step out into the world, we get our identity in what we do. It's never enough. We've got to keep pursuing that we come home and our family gets the leftovers. And what ends up happening is we end up finding that we're trying to be famous to the world. And fame can look, that's your clients, it doesn't have to be that you're on a stage and you're trying to be famous. You're still trying to be famous for board members. You're trying to be famous for your clients. You're trying to be famous for people so that you can earn a living, whatever it is that you're chasing. And our family's getting leftovers. And so what we found this over and over and over again, that the hub of that wheel, that emotional safety, wasn't in the home, because our biggest fans under our roof, our children, our spouse, we're getting the leftovers. And so we're all about saying, hey, how do we help you be famous at home so that you can step out into the world, whether it's a husband, a wife, and the children? You all have a purpose. Your identity is not tied to what you do. Your identity is not tied to what you have. And your identity is not tied to what other people think of you. Finding your true identity so that you can all step out into the world with purpose and vision, because there's more currencies than just money in the world. And we see that over and over and over again as we work with people who have a lot of money, but are bankrupt internally and in their homes.
Josh, you have packed so much that we can unpack throughout the rest of this hour that we have together. But I really love how you just started with your story, and then you unpack that in your book as well. You guys talk about that low moment that you and your wife, Christi, had. And I think we all can relate, because especially when you're in the sleep-deprived parenting phase and you're trying to figure out, how do I put my time and attention into building a business or building a career and also raising children? How do I divert my attention? How do I do what is going to really create the best final and ultimate outcome? And so I just love how you start from that place of humility and coming from where we've all been in the hard moments and the hard times. But I love that your learning wasn't just try harder or just get through it or it's just a phase. I think sometimes we just bypass all of the things that we could do intentionally in those moments to really create that sense of fulfillment. And you said, okay, we can't just look at the spokes. We need to deal with the root issue, the core, deep down, underlying main thing of emotional safety. And
to your point, Rachel, I mean, our culture wants to we are an instant gratification culture. So it's all about pushing through. It's all about, just this too shall pass, right? And it's like, yes, that is true. But when you live with when you live with that mentality of just push through, all you're doing, that trauma, I struggle with the word trauma these days because it's thrown around in so many different ways. But there's like lowercase t trauma, where it's like over and over and over again, you're putting your body under stress and pressure without addressing it. What'll end up happening is that will accumulate over time, and it will, and you just keep pushing through, but it will catch up to you. And so emotional safety is not ignoring or repressing or suppressing emotion. It's identifying it so that you can have control over it. There's a great proverb, Proverbs, I believe it's 16:32. It says this, it says, patience is better than power, and controlling one's emotions than capturing a city. You can capture the city. You can build a successful business. You can make lots of money. You can, whatever it is that you do. But if you can't control your emotions, you will lose the city. You will lose the business. You will lose your legacy. You will lose those things because you've had an inability to be able to control. And controlling emotions isn't about suppressing, repressing, or denying them. It's about acknowledging what they are and being able to process them in a way where you feel safe. And that's not allowing your feelings and emotions to dictate your life and make your decisions. What it is, it's allowing those emotions to, it's giving them a voice. It's going, wait a minute, what is this about? Because our emotions are speaking about something. It's either that we're
Mhm.
not slowing down enough, we're not resting enough, we're not eating healthy enough. Our spouse is screaming at us and trying to get our attention. Our kids are screaming at us trying to get our attention. They're warning signs, and I think it's important that we pay attention to those warning signs to go, okay, what is actually happening underneath this stuff? Because a great example of that would be, let's say that I come home to Christy and, you know, she sees in me that I'm, pushing hard in our business and I'm ignoring her needs. I haven't taken her on a date in a long time. This is just a general example. But all of a sudden, she's short with me. She has an inability to express what she's desiring, which is intimacy and connection, and it's coming out sideways with maybe sarcasm or she's being short. And what do I do then? I get defensive and I get angry. And can't you see how strong? I mean, this goes back to our early years where this was kind of a dance for us, where it's like, can't you see how hard I'm working? I'm working during the day. I'm staying up with the kids at night. At least you get to sleep. It's like now we're like going back and forth at each other,
Comparing,
and there's
yeah.
this tension. What's that?
You comparing, sparring. I mean, it's
Oh,
almost like it's like,
absolutely.
yeah.
But we're not. But what we're doing then is we're allowing our anger to drive the bus. And when anger drives the bus, that's a secondary emotion. There's something deeper going on within. And so, we tell married couples this all the time. What's going on within your heart matters more than what's going on between the two of you.
Mhm.
And so, if I can pay attention to the very thing that what's going on within Christy's heart in a moment like that, is probably that she's feeling lonely. She's feeling um, uh, lonely, maybe not seen, taken for granted, right? And now, and what am I feeling? I'm feeling taken for granted. I'm feeling not seen, but it's coming out in anger in both ways. Our fight or flight system is off, neurobiologically, our fight or flight is off. We're going at each other. And what's the Bible say? James says, brothers and sisters, be quick to listen, slow to
To get
speak,
angry. Yeah.
and slow to become angry.
Mhm.
And the next verse says this, because human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness.
Mhm.
That is powerful and that is humbling. And when we have human anger coming out and we're saying things out of our human anger that we later will regret, that's not controlling our emotions. Our emotions have control over us.
Well, Josh, I think what's really interesting about all of this is that I love that you're coming from the psychologist lens. So you're looking at these really big human problems, right? From looking at what's happening inside. And there's a saying I've heard in multiple contexts before. I'm not sure who initially created this idea or this thought, but you need to slow down to be able to speed up, or you need to get fine picture. You need to go micro in order to have the greatest impact. And I think that's what you're doing by not just saying, fix the communication, fix the way you speak, change your face. I mean, you're not saying
Yeah.
the things that are more external. You're saying, let's actually understand why, and then have empathy for that why. And I love what you said in your book, that you said there's in any dynamic, any human dynamic, there is the possibility to be working towards that person or away from them. And I think what often happens, I'm actually going to pause on that idea for a second and just go back to even how and why this matters. I think so often it can be really easy for somebody to say, I'm building financial security, I'm building financial freedom, I'm building a business, I'm even building a legacy, I'm wanting to communicate effectively to my family, I'm wanting to have our family be on the right page and do the right things in our family culture and do the right things with our mission, our vision, our values. But the challenge, I think, sometimes can come when we're just looking at those are tactics, those are strategies, those are mechanisms for accomplishing our goals. The end goal might be a long line of family flourishing. Well, that's a very noble goal. The end goal might be a thriving business that we're serving many people across the country. We're improving their lives. But in order to be able to have the impact on that scale, you're saying, really, let's start with the micro. Let's go down deep and not just understand our own emotions, but be able to be okay with accepting the emotions of each other in our home. And as we go micro, that allows that expansive impact.
Yeah. And I would venture to say this. We work a lot with high powered, high capacity people. And I would venture to say that a lot of the people listening to this podcast are as well. because it's
Absolutely. Yeah.
about legacy. We're about setting vision. We're about setting mission. We're about, moving in a particular direction. And, my wife, Christy, leads a cohort for women called Tender and Fierce. And one of the questions that a lot of women will jump in with is, what do I have to do to prepare? Is there anything I need to do to get ready for this? And the exact Christy's response is, no, that's the whole point. You are wired to get ready to do something, to get ready to do something. And your body, your nervous system is so about getting that mission, getting that vision, and a lot of times basically what that is an indication of is that we're living out of fight or flight. If you have a to-do list that you just can't ever hit the end of, and you can never settle down and just sit and rest, it's an indication that you're living out of fight or flight, that you just have to have this thing done in order to feel at peace, but you never really feel at peace because it's never really done. And the same can be true for how we lead our families, where we get so hyper focused on we're going to lead our family well, we're going to do this well, that we miss the single greatest component of it, and that is slowing down. And so for a lot of us, in order to truly enter into emotional safety, it could require a lifestyle change in how you, and that's where we have moved with Famous at Home in a lot of ways, is helping families have a blueprint of what does it mean to simplify and slow down, because our culture is driven to next thing, next thing, next thing. And the overwhelming struggle that we hear, we did a survey of over 700 parents and found that the greatest parenting struggle of the day is we're too busy and there's not enough time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's got to be margin. And if we're going to lead well and we're going to see the hearts of our loved ones and even pay attention to our own heart, we have to create the space in our day with each other to be able to do that.
I think you said earlier, you talked about identity, and where that comes from. And I'd like to loop that into this conversation. The idea that your identity is formed not in and of yourself, but through the relationships. And so then what are the most important relationships that define that identity, and how that, so I'd like to go back to that. You mentioned it earlier, and I'd like to come back to that because I think it's a really important piece.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very important piece. And Jamie Winship, who wrote a book called Living Fearlessly, one of the things that he says is that you're going to get your identity in three places. You're going to get it in what you do. You're going to get it in what other people say about you, or how much you have. Those are the three places we tend to get our identity from. And if you don't have your identity grounded in who you are in Christ, and that you are a son and a daughter, like just starting there, you're a son, you're a child of God.
Mm-hmm.
When you come to receive Jesus, you become a child of God. We got to start there, because there is a purpose that is given to you from that very foundation that is so much bigger than what you do on this earth. What you do on this earth and what you're called to on this earth is your assignment. That's not who you are. Right?
Absolutely.
So there's been moments where, we are in a rebrand of Famous at Home. We are getting ready to launch a whole new season of our podcast with new music. We are in a whole new, we're moving to reviving families, family revival.
Awesome.
We're moving in a place that we've never been before. But that came out of a place of hard surrender, where Christy and I, on our knees, in tears, said, Lord, take this. I will go do anything else. I don't need to be doing this anymore. This is not who I am. But in that surrender, and this happened probably 8-9 months ago, in that surrender came beautiful seeds and beautiful fruit that has united the two of us in ways that we've never been united before. Fresh vision, because we had hit a place of exhaustion. We had hit this place of going, we're doing this all on our own. And it's not our identity. I would surrender this tomorrow if I needed to. That's just the reality of it. And has it taken some time to get there? Sure. But I think we all have to get there. But that comes out of my identity in Christ. And so I have to be able to know who I am in him and what he's called me to here. And every day I'm doing other things than just Famous at Home. I'm taking my kids to jiu-jitsu. I'm going to a coffee shop. I'm taking our little one to preschool from time to time. I am interacting with people down at the co-op. I am, it's like all of these things that I'm doing. I'm interacting with my wife. I'm interacting with my kids. How is my identity as a son of God impacted in literally everything that I do, not just what I do?
Mm-hmm.
Every human I interact with,
Yes.
everywhere that I go, that is identity. And what ends up happening is, and this gets into a whole other place for us, but I think it's important to go there. I'll get into the neurobiology of this. So there's a great book called The Other Half of Church. And in that book, it talks a lot about discipleship and how discipleship through the years has been pretty much left only to the left brain. So in other words, it's our theology, it's what we know about God. But in Ephesians chapter 3:19, Paul writes, I pray that you know beyond knowledge the love of God for you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Know in your heart, the Greek know is in your heart, beyond head knowledge, the love of God for you. And so what's fascinating about that is neurobiologically, it is our right brain that experiences love. Our left brain, I can tell you all about God's love for me. I can quote every verse about it that I know. I can tell you theologically about God's love, why he sent Jesus. I can tell you all about God's love. But if I haven't experienced it, 1 John 4:19 says, we love because he first loved us.
Mm-hmm.
My ability to love my wife and my kids flows out of my ability to experience his love for me. You take that to the natural, the first thing that someone asks you when you go to the therapist, or a counselor is going to ask you when you go to a therapist, is, what's your relationship like with mom and dad? In other words, how well were you loved? Because my ability to go out and then love and leave a legacy of love is reflective of my identity of having experienced love. And what's fascinating about that is that the right side of the brain processes information at 1/6 of a second. And it's faster than the left side of the brain. So when you walk into a room, the very first thing you're doing is your brain it's reading the room. And it's reading the room based upon who you think that you are. So in other words, if you're in a business setting and you're in a network setting, you're walking into that room either out of an identity that is based on scarcity or abundance. I'm walking into that room going, oh, I already know that I'm loved. I have all that I ask and need and imagine because I'm a son or a daughter of God. But if I walk into that room going, I don't have enough time, we don't have enough money for our business, we don't have enough of this, now all of a sudden my networking in that room is going to look very much about me and my actions, my attitudes, because I'm getting my identity out of what I have, what other people think of me, or what I do. And so Brennan Manning in 1993 wrote a book called Abba's Child. And in that book, in chapter 2, he wrote about the imposter syndrome. And I'm answering this question, Lucas, in a long roundabout way, and I'm going to sum it up here with this. In that book, he wrote that you can identify that you're walking in your imposter, or that you're showing up in your home, giving your family your leftovers, however that is, in one of two ways. When you walk into a room, do you look around the room and are you going, here I am, here I am? Or do you walk into a room going, oh, there you are. There you are, Lucas. There you are, Rachel. Holding your baby, being famous at home, enjoying your life. There you are. Tell me about you. Tell me what's going on in your world, versus going, hey, by the way, I have this new book. Would you have me on your podcast so that I could do, it's like, you see what I mean? So it's the posturing, it's how we function in the world around us. And so identity flows out of this very place. And this answers the question, Lucas, I hope, at least from the way that we see it, is that we have to first, and this is kind of the new shift with Famous at Home, we first have to find our way back home. That is to the love of the Father. And then we have to find our way back home to knowing who we are in him. That is our true selves, where our identity lies. And then it's only out of that flow that we then can find our way back into our earthly homes with our spouses and our kids and show up fully with the love of the Father for us, the love of me for me, love your neighbor as yourself. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
in a, self-help, self-love kind of way. That is in a, I know that I'm loved by the Father. I can now, therefore, I don't have to perform for you. I can love you for who you are and enter your world without needing anything from you. That's the overflow of identity. But when we
Mm-hmm.
live in a culture, it's trying to tell us that our identity is in our likes and our and then followers and what people think of us and how much money we have. Man, our brain isn't calm enough to realize that we're loved, and that's a big shift. And that's what we're all about.
Hmm.
That's
That's
just
that's actually deep because when you think of it from a legacy perspective, when you get to the end of your life, even if you were finding a level of fulfillment in that, it's temporary. And then when you get to the end of your life, you realize that it there really wasn't. It's empty. It's gone. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's why I was saying earlier, there's more currencies than money. I never forget when I was early on. Our oldest is 12, and I remember when he was probably about, oh my goodness, I think he was 6 months old at the time. He was young. Yeah, he was young. And I remember calling a friend because I was really struggling in our business. Like I was just like, man, we've got, as entrepreneurs, we all know what those seasons of life are like. And I'll never forget. I remember right where I was standing. I was standing in the driveway um, in Florida at this vacation house with my wife's parents, and I'm wrestling with all this stuff, feeling bad about being on vacation in the middle of it. And he just said, "Man," he's like, "Let's celebrate this. Let's celebrate this moment." And I was like, "What do you mean, let's celebrate this moment?" And he's like, "Well, let's celebrate." He said, You have a 6 month old son, and you'll never have a 6 month old son again. Like he will never be 6 months again. Like I have another son who's now who was 6 months, but he's like, he will never be six months
yeah,
again.
yeah, this
And
moment.
you have the ability to be on a vacation. You have the ability on a Tuesday afternoon to choose to go for a walk, to have this conversation with me rather than calling your boss or whatever. Like, look at the positives of what's going on right now. Enter into that 6 months old's life, be present with him because you'll never get these moments back again. And it was a real wake up call to me. And that was his moment. It was he said, there's more currencies than money. Man, you're building. And this is where, so we used to end our podcast with, and up until this past week, like literally, we are switching this week. I would end the podcast with the greatest red carpet you'll ever walk is through your front door. You read that in the book. Greatest
Mm-hmm.
red carpet you'll ever walk is through your front door because we all want to be famous to the world, right? We're all walking red carpets. But when we come home, our kids are bouncing up and down. They're so excited to see us. Some of the time, our spouse is, maybe not most, but some. If you're lucky, if it's most. But it's like but truly though, deep down, they are your biggest fans. Your spouse, your kids. But we also know, Lucas, this is the point, is that at the end of life, we actually know that the greatest red carpet we'll ever walk is from this life to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the greatest red carpet. And that's what we're truly living for, is building for his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And when we can see that frame of reference, now I'm not just trying to please my spouse and my kids. Now what I'm trying to do is give them purpose and vision bigger than they ever could. And I'm trying to pass that on to them as well.
Mm. Josh, I just really love how you were talking about identity being where you are experiencing that, that right brain side of experiencing and being rather than just knowing from the left brain. I don't know if I'm saying the right side of the
That's
brain.
exactly
I never
right.
can. Okay.
No,
So
that's exactly right.
so now when you're in a position of being, then you can share and give and do. And I mean, if you look at like the psychology around this, I'm sure that you're able to be in flow more. You're able to be fulfilled. You're able to work from your unique abilities. You're able to do more, have more impact through the things that you do. And I loved that lens that you said. I mean, every one of us has all experienced the person in the networking room with, I mean, we've called it scarcity breath before. I need this
Yep.
sale. But I loved how you said, here I am, or there you are, because that can show up in every single place, in every single relationship. And
Absolutely.
what you're saying is, let's give that gift of presence
Yep.
to others, because ultimately, if they experience the feeling of love from the way that we operate, the way that we see them, the way that we notice, the way that we hear and pay attention rather than just thinking of our next thing to say. If that person becomes important to us, then we're giving them a gift that now they can walk into the next room and be able to give to somebody else. And that's rather than taking for me and then our children have to take for themselves. You're starting a chain reaction really of being able to give this gift of presence and be fully alive in who God's called and created us to be.
Absolutely. And there you are will get you so much further
Oh,
than here I
absolutely.
am ever will
Yeah,
in any room. Um,
absolutely.
because you even be able to lay your head on the pillow at night realizing that I served that person today.
Hmm.
And but it ultimately comes down to a trust. Like, am I trusting the Lord that he's got me, that he will provide all that I ask and need, that even though he takes care of the birds of the air, and how much more will he take care of me? Those
Hmm.
are truths that we have to pay attention to, or, and we have to realize in our lives, or we will get into the scarcity side. And I mean, let's be honest, we all have been there. We've all had scarcity breath. We've all
Yeah,
lived that.
yeah.
And I think there's a journey at which we are always trying to make sure that we're not entering into that. It's an
Hmm.
ebb and flow. That's a whole part of it. But that's why
It's
the
the
experience,
choice. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was just talking to a buddy yesterday. One of the things that we do each week is we call each other and we just have confession, one to another. It's like,
Mm.
I just want to, I remember the late Larry Crabb said one time to me, he said, I don't go to your grave with any secrets. And I think that, one of the things that my friend and I were just talking yesterday is we confess, how we're treating our wives, and we confess to each other, just really to stay clean in our lives. But Jesus said this in the Beatitudes. He said in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And I'll tell you, like, our conversation so much around here is, how do we see God? I want to see
Hmm.
God show up in my everyday life. I want my kids to see God show up in our everyday lives. And yeah, it's just remarkable to see how when we invite our kids into praying that there's bigger purpose, and how that God's using them to
Hmm.
encourage other people. It just they realize that they're not just going to school and trying to find what they want to be when they grow up and watching TV. And no, they have purpose even today, and God's using them and wants to use them. And it brings the whole family together to go, how do we see God in our everyday life, in everywhere we interact?
Mm.
And that's a question that the culture's not giving us.
Oh my goodness, Josh, this is just so, so good. I hope that anyone who's listening, that you are just feeling the the release of knowing that it's not just about the striving, it's not just about the doing, the knowledge, but being in a position of really just being able to receive the love that God has for you.
And
And
let me, yeah, Rachel, and let me give you an example of this too. So this is just fresh. This is just this week. So, um, our daughter Kennedy, she's 10, and she really wanted kittens for Christmas. And so I had never really loved cats in my life. I was allergic to them. I just haven't been a big cat person. Well, because we were moving to the country and they could be outdoor cats, they ended up becoming indoor outdoor. But they won me over a little bit. These kitties are just amazing. She got two kittens for Christmas. Um, well, one of them on Sunday morning, I let them out early in the morning, and usually by afternoon they're back, trying to get some food, things like that. Well, that night we hadn't seen her all day. That night she went missing.
Mm.
She didn't come home, and our daughter's devastated. And I'm like, you know what? She'll be back. She's a cat. She's got 9 lives. She'll be good. We wake up the next morning, nowhere to be seen. So I let them out Sunday morning. Monday morning rolls around, and there's no, I mean, it gets to Monday afternoon, and we live in the woods, and I'm going, okay, there's probably a likelihood this cat may not be coming home. And so by Monday afternoon, she's just, I mean, we're praying, as a family, we're grieving, we're praying. And as a dad, I've got a lot going on. We're in the middle of a rebrand. We're filming a mini documentary. We've got podcast interviews that we're doing. Like I've got a lot on my plate, and a lot happening, a lot of moving parts. And yet I had to consciously go, I'm going to grieve with my girl. And I remember Monday night, so this would have been 2 nights ago. I'm laying up through the night and I'm thinking about this kitten, this cat. It was about a year old cat, and I'm like, I'm grieving the loss of her. I'm already doing that in my own head and in my own life, and just trying to enter into my daughter's world because I knew. So I woke up then yesterday morning and I have a ton going on. We have a film crew coming to do this little mini documentary that my wife and I are doing. Um, and I had to get ready with some things, but I knew that if I didn't enter into her world, I would be missing it. And so I put everything on hold, everything that my body and my fight or flight, my system is going, you have to get this done. You have to get this done. And I jumped on the four-wheeler with her and we started just surveying the property. And we looked and we looked and I spent about an hour with her just looking around. I didn't have a lot of hope. I be honest, very little faith, but I said, I'm going to do this. And so I did it. We prayed into it. Yesterday afternoon, we get I get a text from a neighbor saying that their dogs have this animal pinned in their shed and they don't know what kind of animal it is, but it could be our cat.
Oh my
Long
gosh.
story short, I went down and rescued it. It was the cat. Our daughter's just overjoyed. And even though that comes with a good ending, the whole point is through the process was entering into her world, being safe for her so that she knew that her grieving wasn't for naught. I wasn't just going, this is just a cat. Like, really, we'll get you another one. I wasn't, I was doing everything I could to be there for her, with her in that, even though I had all these other things screaming for my attention. And to me, I wrestled with it because I had all these other things screaming for my attention, but I knew, and in the past, I might not have entered in the way that I did this time. But I think that's the point of living simply, to go, there are more currencies. I have the ability to do this. I need to do this and I need to enter her world. But we have to slow down. We have to have a mindset of margin and abundance in order to be able to do that. And I had to be able to tell myself, Lord, I know that you will give me enough time to get everything done that I thought I was going to get done this morning. You will redeem this because I'm going, oh, there you are, not here I am. And I needed to show up in a very important moment for my daughter. And so that's just as a real life example that just recently happened for us, I think that is, I wrestled with that. I was on the four-wheeler with her and I'm going, okay, I'm doing this. And here we are. And all of that's going through my brain. I'm like, the things that I have to do are going through my brain, but I kept telling myself, and I knew, just praying, this is what I need to be doing right now.
Josh, you did in example and walking out with real life experience, with real skin on, this thing of putting the most important things first. And I think so often we do in our culture, wear that badge of busy and we're running everywhere and we're doing all the things. And the problem is we're doing all the things. We're not doing any of the important things. We haven't slowed down. We haven't made the space for the important things to really happen. And so I love this shift that you're talking about, not only just identity, but you're talking about seeing other people. That's really the beginning point of truly being able to recognize the need for somebody else so that you can serve them, so you can provide value, which is the beginning of any financial or economic transaction in the first place. It's that being able to really see somebody and serve them well. So we're going to try to pull the, go ahead.
I'll say that we use the word scarcity abundance, but it also, you could say it in are you living in faith or fear? Right.
Yeah, 100%.
Fear is we can be driven by both. And it's not like you live in one or the other. It's not binary. It's like you're saying, it's with scarcity and abundance, it's something that we have to consciously choose to, or every day, to walk in faith. And we all, I think every human deals with this faith and fear. And so, the idea that you could have been like, well, I got all these things to do, but that's more of the fear talking, like I got to get it done. And then,
So
that's exactly
just for the sake of time, I know we're getting close to the end of our time together today. So I'm going to pull a couple of strands together. You then really just in your book, Famous at Home, a lot of the pieces that you're helping couples to put in place or families to do is to have rhythms that allow for that peace and for that time, for that lack of busy, so that you can have space for the things that really matter. And I love how you talk about rhythms and rest and having a Shabbat and all the things that we love and value doing as well. And then you bring really the family to a point of looking at what their identity is as a family. How do we gel together and figure out what our mission and our vision and our values are together as a family? And really, I just wanted to point out one piece, and then I want you to share how people can reach out to you, how they can connect with you, because here's what I see. I see a lot of families needing to do this critical work of identifying what they stand for as a family, who they are, being able to communicate identity to their children, being able to really connect as a unit and put that focus and that value on family, because it's that real thing that we're all really living for that we don't often admit. The reason that I think this is so valuable, though, is because you're coming from that psychologist lens. You're helping people to really understand how to go into their challenges, their challenged way of communicating, all of the things that undo the good work that you're trying to establish. So if I can communicate this even more clearly, as we're seeing families who want to put in place the right financial planning, the right estate planning, communicate about the financial assets that are being left for the next generation, or that they're building together with the next generation, and they're in a position of really wanting to get clear and articulate about those things, what can still trump all of that are unhealthy relationships. Because you can even put in place the right family traditions, and you can have the right, you can even try to put rhythms in place. You can even lean on and value your family lineage and the stories that came before, and share those stories forward to the children that are to come in your family, for the intent and purpose of creating a legacy. And you can do all of the right things. But if you have challenges in your own heart, unmet, I don't know how you say this in psychology language, but those places of unfulfillment, or where we didn't experience love, then we're putting that on our children. We have the challenging dynamics between husband and wife. We have lack of fulfillment in the home. We have lack of living the way that we're really truly called to live, that we want to live, that we all know we'd be better by living, but sometimes it can feel really hard to get there. And so I just want you to be able to share what tools you have to be able to help couples and families to really be able to dig into what those to improving and to fixing those relationships, so that all of the things that they're building together as a family really can stand and last.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So if you go to famousathome.com, we have, as I said, my wife leads a cohort called Tender and Fierce, and she brings in somatic experiencing into a spirit-filled journey. It's just a beautiful journey that she walks women through in their own lives. The journey that we just talked about today for women specifically. And then I am getting ready to launch. Haven't launched it yet, but I'm getting ready to. You can sign it up. You can sign up for your interest at famousathome.com. But we have an interest form there for a coaching cohort for men. It's a discipleship for leading your family well in this way, finding your identity, living out of your identity, so that you can show up and be famous at home. And so that's starting here in a few months. And then we do marriage intensives, we do coaching intensives, we do all coaching now. So we do coaching intensives, and all of our books, children's books. We have an online curriculum for kids on emotional intelligence and spiritual growth. And so we really like to combine that emotional intelligence and spiritual growth component. Peter Scazzaro once said that his famous line of, "You can only be as spiritually mature as you are emotionally mature." Our goal is really to bring emotional maturity into kids at an early age in a culture that's where they're regressing because of screen time and all these other things. We really want to change that, especially for the faith community, just to help us not be caught up, to be in the world, but not of the world, and to be able to raise kids who love God and love others well, and living joyfully. I think that's the key, living joyfully. So so you can find out all that we're doing. We have a Famous at Home podcast you can listen to as well, but all that can be found at famousathome.com.
Josh, this has just really been a pleasure. And you mentioned living joyfully. I had written down that I want to come back to that idea of enjoy. And it was specifically when you were talking about that moment where you'll never again have this child at 6 months old being able to be on this vacation, being able to make the choice to have this phone call. And I think it's just so beautiful to be able to settle into enjoying the season that we're in, even with the hard, even with the crazy, even with all of the unanswered questions. And so thank you for coming back and looping back to that point of joy, which is emotional. So that's an emotional piece.
I actually have come to a place where I think that in my parenting, and this whole idea of emotional safety is that I'm not filtering it through the lens of, are my children doing right from wrong? I hope that we get that figured out pretty easily. But are my kids experiencing joy? There's a lack of joy in this world today. And if I can raise my kids to be joyful, they're going to choose right from wrong well. And I feel like it's a higher benchmark than just having my kids do what's right. I want them to experience true joy. And so that's a key component.
Which I hear you saying, and I'm just going to say, joy and being happy are two completely different things.
100%.
Right?
Which means I have to be joyful human. Yes. I have to be able to dance in the struggle. I have to be able to find joy in the grief. I have to be able to bring joy to my daughter when in the unknown of her cat being lost. That we might, and the reality that we might not get her cat back, and find joy in the middle of that for her to experience joy. And part of that is holding grief and joy together. That's a whole other conversation for another
day. It is.
Yeah.
Yes. Those competing dynamic opposite emotions. Well, as you've been listening today, I'm sure that you've just heard just so much that you resonate with, just from building a business to the value of just the relationships under your own roof to what's going on inside of your own heart. And I just hope that you will be able to walk away from this episode and this podcast feeling so much more whole, and just with answers that maybe you didn't even know you were looking for. So if you want to reach out to Josh, go ahead and go to famousathome.com, and I highly recommend their book, Famous at Home, as well. And in closing, please remember, success leaves clues. So model the successful future.